let me tell you something. If you haven't seen this, Travolta is sublime in this. You'll see the type of person that he plays. I don't want to spoil anything, but after everything that he goes through, something that keeps this film anchored is him. You emotionally keep coming back to him. California coastline. It really is one of the best. So you're going to enjoy it. The film made its world premiere at the Rome Film Festival. He won Best Actor there for The Fanatic. He said afterwards, The Fanatic! Ladies and gentlemen, his roles are Vinny Vega, Danny Zuko, Tony Moreno, Chili Palmer, you name it, Robert Shapiro, ladies and gentlemen, Golden Globe and Emmy winner, and two-time Oscar nominee, John Travolta.
I love it too. Appreciate it so much. And this is what's that?
Where's the strawberry ice cream?
Strawberry ice cream, man.
Strawberry ice cream.
Yes. This is one of my favorite movies I've ever done, and to get your reaction utterly pleases me. So thank you very much.
This is such a sublime role. He's really wonderful, and you are so nuanced in this. Are these types of roles hard to find?
Yes, and to some degree, it's whether you'll be permitted to do it is more the issue, because the more unusual the characters or more unusual the story, they're not easily financeable. So if you fall in love with a piece of material and you adore it, then the fight is, who am I going to get to finance this and support this eccentric piece of work that you believe in and the director believes in and the writer believes in, but how do you convince them? So you have to, cut costs down, you have to make deals with people, and you have to kind of suffer through those levels of bureaucracy and fixed ideas of what should be or shouldn't be, and then if you're tenacious enough, you'll get it done. And I'm pretty good at that. If I really fall in love with something, I'm pretty good at. I'm probably as good as Moose as getting what he wants. So that's probably the real truth of this kind of project. You have to work at it to get it done. Yeah.
And tell us about how you prepared for the role, because he's just everything. It's so detailed and so smooth.
Well, thank you. It was a joy, because a lot of the details are in the script. I had to figure out a way to make them come alive and believe them. And what happened, there was a moment where I said, really, I have to put this man on the spectrum in order to justify some of the more irrational behavior he has. So I just was familiar with autism, and I was familiar with Asperger's, and I knew that Fred was actually designing it to a certain degree that way, but I had to take it a little further in order to, when he kills the maid, for instance, and then he talks about nosebleeds and that hurts, and he's not clocking that he killed her. You have to be somewhere else in order to get away with that kind of behavior on screen, and then he gets distracted by a chime, and then he goes in and he's forgotten about that, and he's just enjoying being in his favorite movie star's house. So those are the things that you have to come up with ideas, and that was the kind of through line that I used for that.
And then the interesting thing about this movie is how it takes you into the subculture over at Hollywood and Highland, and the performers that are out there on the street. Tell me about your takeaway and learning about that, delving into that world.
Well, it's a very interesting world, and certainly Fred Durst was far more familiar with it than I was. I had to be enlightened about a lot of that, other than my living in Hollywood for so many years and observing it with my own eyes. And you've seen the Marilyn Monroes and the Supermans, and you know what they're doing, and they're finding a way to make a living through their fantasy. But correlated to that, there's some mental and physical illness. Sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes they're just smarter than a whip, and other times it's correlated to some other special thing. So I just I'm not a person who judges a character. I just find a way to enjoy playing a character, and I don't think I ever enjoyed playing a character more than this. As a matter of fact, there's talk of how actors stay in characters between takes out of necessity to stay in the zone. Well, I just liked the zone. I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't wait to be him every day. And it was just a greater or lesser degree contagious because the actual crew members couldn't wait to see Moose every day. And they were actually like a team effort. They would improvise with me and ask Moose a ton of questions, which we all know is what a great acting coach does, is just informs you by asking a lot of good questions about your character, what they think, what they feel, what they want, and that every day the crew would invite this kind of patter between me, and I just couldn't wait to play Moose. So I utterly stayed in character most of the day out of pleasure, not out of necessity.
Is there another ending? Was there an alternative ending where Moose was
obsessed with Jimmy Cagney when I was 5, and my mother could literally get me to do anything by pretending Jimmy Cagney was on the phone. Jimmy wants you to do about, whatever it was, and I'd run and do whatever Jimmy. And we were a show business family, and like my sister was with Ethel Merman and Gypsy, and when I was a little boy, and so I thought my mother knew Arlene Francis, so we knew some celebrities, so I thought maybe she really does know Jimmy Cagney. It's not that far-fetched. Anyway, it worked for about 2 years. I wanted to meet him, and of course we couldn't. But I did meet him when I became established. I met him when he was 80, and I told him that I loved him. And he cried, because I don't know when the last time anyone had told him that they loved him. And we were off and running for 5 years, the last 5 years of his life, which is identical to what I did with Marlon Brando. The last 5 years of his life, we were friends. And it's a special moment when you get to express to the ones you admire that special love.
He was very lovable.
Yes.
His kids speak very warmly about him.
As they should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to some audience questions.
All right.
This one is
because what's that?
Thank you so much for loving my question.
Well, it's a good question because I think you'll be shocked at what my options were. I grew up in a theatrical family. We played sports too because my dad loved sports, but the only real option I had was performing. I knew I could act, I knew I could sing, and I knew I could dance. I wasn't a great student. As a matter of fact, I dropped out of high school. And when it came time to think about making a living, I knew I could only make a living at something I adored. The other thing I adored was aviation, but the education level that you needed to achieve being an airline pilot or something. So I thought, well, if this whole acting thing doesn't work out, there's always luggage handling at LA, at LaGuardia, Kennedy, Newark. I could do that, or maybe I could do reservations, or I wanted something with the airlines, if I could, if this all didn't work out. I, matter of fact, forced my sisters to submit their resumes to the various airlines just so I would know somebody that worked for the airlines. So anyway, that's probably the truth,
I actually put on the question excluding being a pilot.
Oh well, no, but I wasn't educated enough to be a pilot, and I didn't have the finance. I had to do Broadway to finance being a pilot. The first 2 years on Broadway is I put all my extra money away for lessons to fly, and you didn't make a whole lot on Broadway. but whatever spare money went to my air lessons. Well, as I said earlier, I did know several autistic people and Asperger's people, but the script really led me to advance those behaviors because of the structure of what they needed that character to do. So it was an eclectic thing. You borrow, when I did Robert Shapiro, yes, I was Robert Shapiro, but I was also about 5 other executives that I knew over the years that had that similar hoity kind of, altitude thing that is humorous and fun to watch. So yes, it's 1, 2, and maybe it's 5, but you use your memories and your recall to kind of create something new, and sometimes even new behavior happens on the set, and you discover it on the set. Especially if you have the whole crew improvising with you, you find out all wonderful things about the character.
So it was several different people that you've observed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, several different people. Having trouble with your card? Well, I can still answer it. Where are you? Oh, you're kidding. Well, I'll answer it anyway, even though he's not here. No.
What is your process when you approach
Process.
a character?
Well, I have an old-fashioned process. It's nothing that actors haven't heard of before, but it's the traditional building of a character. You collect all the information from the script that you can get, which is vital, and then you do whatever aspects that you have the most affection for in that character, and you collect that, and then you start doing any research or discovery that you need to add to the areas that you are not familiar with. Like, for instance, in Primary Colors, I was not familiar with politics enough to justify portraying a president, so I went to school and learned about the Senate and the systems that we have, the bureaucracy that we have, that I was really not honestly familiar with at all. And that was a great adventure. And actors get to have these great adventures when they don't know a subject matter. So you have to add that to the way you approach a character. And then the fun part, the dressing him up, or in Hairspray, dressing her up, adding weight. The physical attributes, the walk, the talk, the cadence, the accent, the speech pattern, whatever it is that will make that character a totality, you add it. Almost, I hate to compare it to baking a cake, but it is kind of like it's a recipe. And then one day it bakes, or you arrive at a moment where you can think with that character. And when you can think with a character, there's such a joy of accomplishment, because you know that you can contact that character in a moment's notice. That there's no lag between the time you've arrived and the time you can present that character. And I know any of us here that are actors know that feeling of, oh, I can be this guy or girl in a second. I know it like the back of my hand, and there's a joy of that, and there's a confidence in that. But if you're not quite there, then you have to bake it a little further, and then you always arrive, And I usually try not to take a role that I will find difficult to have fun discovering, And if I don't identify with it enough in a way that, because even characters that are unpleasant or evil, it's not that you have to like them. You don't. You just have to like playing them. You have to have a pleasure in playing them, and then they become likable or watchable, regardless of how evil they are, because you're getting a kick out of it, out of playing them, and people pick up on the joy you have playing those characters. So it's a complex question, but I do think there's a recipe to it. My mother was very good at that. She had a lot of the old Russian books of building a character and acting is believing and all those things. So they were. I try not to make acting as complex as it could appear, because it should be a joyous thing. It should be an adventure and fun. And once you're in a zone, you can't make a mistake, really. because everything you do will be believable if you're in that zone, and then it takes your worry off. Oh, was that a good enough take? Was that a good, that obsession that actors can get when they haven't felt confident enough. But if you arrive at a certain point, you don't really care. Whatever take you want, Mr. Director or Mr. Producer. You feel that way.
There's a saying in improv that they teach over at Upright Citizens Brigade. When you're doing a scene, when you're improvising a scene, if it feels easy, that's because it is.
Yeah,
and that's when you know it's working.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I like to have darker scenes come from a more objective perspective. I can go darker from a higher level, a happier level of thinking down, as opposed to if I find myself in hell, I can't navigate through hell, portraying hell, but I can navigate far better from a higher perspective, navigating hell. I want to still be to some degree in control, but lost in the reality, but still can think with it and function with it. Otherwise, you may not arrive anywhere that is usable. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I'm going off book. Primary Colors, love that movie. Did you ever get to meet President Clinton either
Yes.
before or after? And what was his response? That moment in the bathroom, I just can't get a break. is still a great scene.
Well, it was a pleasure to do that film, a pleasure to play that character. He, I think that he was so gracious about the idea, more than I think anyone else would have been. But we were also very generous to his humanity. We really tried very much to show every side of him and why he could be and was a great president, regardless of personal ethics. It was what was his intent. And I think the scene in that movie that worked the best was the donut scene, where has real understanding of this worker and wants to, deeply do something about his condition and his scene as a politician. If you're feeling Sprite in the moment of improvising, and a lot of directors that are trusting don't mind you're doing that. And certainly Fred was allowing me to improvise, and sometimes how it is, improvisations allow you to have a reality that give a boost to the written word, because it was your own creation, and now you're spinning it into a written word, and now that written word has a little more life in it because you created something. Whether they use it or not, I think improvisation is valuable to get you going, to get you in the zone of the thinking of that character. Whether they use it or not, it doesn't matter. It's that it helps you arrive at a destination that I really think there's a distinct difference of letting you do things before and after, and sometimes during. Now, sometimes writing is so freaking brilliant that you don't want to go near improvisation, and we all know those pieces of material that you don't want to change it. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't improvise something to get you in the thinkingness of that already brilliantly written piece. You were constantly improvising. To die to that, and humor, and who was better at it, and so on and so forth. And there was a group when I first moved to Hollywood that was a group of players that would, which I thought was a clever technique. You would improvise, but you had to do it in different types of emotion, and stay in that emotion. And then when the teacher would yell out a different emotion, you had to do the same dialogue, but in that new emotion. And that was kind of fun to not only think in new dialogue, but to now give you a little ability to change the emotion in the middle of that dialogue. So you being enthusiastically talking about it, now say, now do it in fear. In the same dialogue comes out in fear, and you go, wow, I have the ability to switch off emotionally during that same line that might have been written in a fixed way. Now I have the ability to turn it up, turn it down, turn it sideways, and it just gives you a kind of Chinese menu of thinking about about it. It gives you ambidextrous concepts.
So, if you don't mind, take us back to the beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong. Were you 15, summer stock, when you were first discovered, or was it even before that?
Well, my first play was a Frank D. Gilroy. I was 12, and that was quite successful for me, and it was an off-Broadway type of production. But then I was discovered in summer theater by a manager, then an agent, and that was kind of my first invitation to go out on jobs that were significant to further one's career. So I had a lucky break in that way.
And then how was it? How was it in the early days? Was it?
I think it's a lot easier than it is today. I don't know how many of you, you're all younger than I am, but in the day, there was less competition, I found. You know, if I went up for a role, there might be, and it's not even making a good story or exaggeration, but in the room might have been Richard Gere, Treat Williams, maybe, 3 or 4 other people that are now not as famous, but you're familiar with. And that was it. So it was kind of, you had like a 1 in 5 chance, you had a 1 in 7 chance. And I was, because I quit school, I was younger, so often I was more correctly cast than they were who they were a bit older. So I felt it was a beautiful window in a rarefied time in the history of show business to have a chance. I don't know how well I would do today in retrospect. I just have had the opportunity to do well. But I feel very deeply for everyone. It's a little more work today to get it going.
And the whole thing, I mean, this is now old shoe now, but the whole thing of actors putting themselves on tape. Back then, you had to go. Like if they wanted to see
yes,
you,
you went in person
Yeah.
because the tape machines were very antiquated but new then, and you had to be in a lit studio, and basically that was the equivalent of a screen test, where let's say 20 years before that or 10 years, you did it on film. Although I did do Carrie, I did a screen test on film, but Days of Heaven, which I was cast in, was on video as an audition, and those are the 2 I remember being different. But yes, you had to go there is the answer to your question.
Was it the same thing? Did you just go in, dance, and boom, it was over? You had the part. Because you're a wonderful dancer and have been.
Well, I don't know if everyone has the time for the real story, but it's a very long story.
Yes, we do.
Okay,
We have
well,
time.
it worked like this, and maybe because it's a group of artists in this room, maybe it's a great lesson in it somewhere, if you track with me. So I'm 17, and I'm auditioning for a stage show of Jesus Christ Superstar. And a man by the name of Robert Stigwood is casting it. He's a producer, and he had responsibility of casting it. And I auditioned, and of course I didn't get it because this man, who I didn't know who he was at the time, said, "You're too young to play Jesus." And I said, "Not fine," and I left on my merry way. Well, cut to 5 years later, the same man, with my not connecting the dots, cast me in a movie called Grease and another movie called Saturday Night Fever.
Wow.
Now, I'm at dinner with him, and he was a very eccentric Australian guy who, talked like this, and, he had this kind of, style of, and he said, I'm over the moon about your performance in Saturday Night Fever. You are a shining star. That kind of thing. And he said, "I want to show you something." And now we're already in business. I'm already filming Saturday Night Fever. And he shows me the yellow page where those people make notes. And he said, it has my name, John Travolta, 17 years old. Not right for Jesus, but watch out, he's going to be a very big star.
Wow.
So you never know where these seeds are going to be planted. You could be rejected up the wazoo, but maybe you've planted a seed that will arrive 5 years later. You don't know. And that's the beautiful thing. I told my daughter this, who's starting out, and I said, Ella, always do your best at an audition. Behave, which is what I do with every role. Behave as though it's the best role you've ever had, and it's the last time you'll ever act. Even though you know that's not true. But behave that way. Give it everything you've got, and it will always pay off. Because A, those auditions are kept forever, and it will show up somewhere down the line, whether you're good in it or not. So pretend that you're not just doing it to get that job. You're doing it for prosperity's sake. You're doing it because someone will have you on film forever somewhere. And when it shows up, you can say, you know, whatever they said, whether I got that job or I didn't get that job, I was freaking great that day. And I killed it. And there's a pride in that. And so, and whatever comes of it, comes of it. But it's not for naught. I really believe it's never for naught. And I have other stories like that prove themselves wonderful in the end game, you know. So keep that in mind when you're doing your adventure through your career, which is what it should be, is adventure.
Tell us about resilience. You know, you've been reborn many times. What's the trick? What's the trick, and how is today different? You had mentioned a little bit about how today is different for actors than.
It's harder today, but the same antics happen, and I can say this from. Theoretically I should be retired by now, but I'm not going to. but I can also tell you that what I've learned is that critiquing something is fine. It's an opinion. It must be left as an opinion only, because beautifulness and ugliness is an opinion. So is art. You like something, you don't like it. Just leave it at that as an opinion. Don't introvert on it. Don't take it to heart. Because anyone that's trying to nullify you or make less of you is not on your team, A, and B, they might be wrong. You see? It's hard when I see these talent shows, I get so upset because I'll sit there and I'll think, that killed. That girl was brilliant. She was fucking great. And then Simon or someone will just say, I go, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I'd have cast her in a second. You see, so it's also subjective. You know, being relevant is subjective. Opinions are subjective. And we've all, and I think we're all guilty of this, we've seen movies that are not particularly good, but we love them for our own personal reasons. And we've seen great movies that we don't love, that everybody else loves. So what? It's an opinion. There's got to be an acceptability of a difference of opinion somewhere, somehow. So when you're auditioning, and if you're ever rejected, just know that that's all it is. I mean, I was at auditions where one guy told me to get out of show business. I was 16, and I thought I did a great job. He thought I was terrible. And I thought he was crazy. Sure. I said, I just killed him at, But anyway, that comes from a lot of people, supporting you and giving you a kind of wherewithal and confidence too. But yeah, I think you have to clock that thing that we all, if you waste your time, unless there's something very interesting to learn about it, which I have never found someone being made shit of worth anything. I really haven't. I've just, what's the purpose? What's the outcome? What's the value? I don't get it, Even, there's no bad choices. An actor tries something. Let them try it. How do you know if it's a bad choice? It might be the best choice. Let them have at it. And then hone it. I love the directors that say, okay, that was good. Now try it this way. They never go, that was shit. Try it this way. And if they do, fuck them. They're not in the right state of mind. You're trying to get a ship to sail. they're putting holes in your ship as you're telling. You really want a good movie? That's not going to help saying that sucks. You know, saying that that's a good choice. We'll put it there. Let's try something else. That's fine. That's fair. You know. He's celebrating his film with a bunch of people last night, and I caught up with him, and it was fantastic. The catch up. I would love that. Brian and I talk every couple of years, and I'm with you. You know, but these great directors, you know, they hire you because they have 90% of their job is done when they've cast you, because they believe that you're the rightest person. So you don't ever want to force them to do something that's not organic. Look how much Quentin fought for me to be in Pulp Fiction. I mean, this guy put his reputation, his career on the line to get me because he had that much confidence. So you give them their leeway just like you want your leeway. And you don't force that hand, you know. It's not a mafia, you know. They're inspired by something, and they want to use you. They will tell you, and they will invite you in, you know. Anyway, that's my take on it. But yeah.
Brilliant.
You're awesome.
So let's meet and greet.
The Fanatic.
All right. Great job. Can I have a picture of you? She's right here.